Good afternoon, class. Hope you're all doing well today. I want to start with a quote by former President George W. Bush before I start my topic. George W. Bush once said, "America is the land of the second chance, and when the gates of the prison open, the path ahead shall lead to a better life." However, this cannot be any more far from the truth, in my opinion, about the California correctional system and many others. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, an estimated 2/3, which is 68%, of 405,000 prisoners released in 30 states in 2005 till now were arrested for a new crime within 3 years of release from prison. And 3/4, which is about 77%, were arrested within 5 years. More than a third, which is 37% about, of prisoners who were arrested within 5 years of release were arrested within the first 6 months after release, with more than half arrested by the end of the first year. So the proposition I'm going to argue for is the criminal justice system fails to sufficiently give support to inmates and the access to prevent future crime. My three major claims include: 1, the system does not help inmates become economically secure upon release. 2, programs for inmates are not truly helping them to be rehabilitated into the world. And 3, isolated inmates do not know how to interact with each other, therefore making them very unstable. So, first, again, after the release of an inmate, the system doesn't help them become economically secure. Their criminal record does not go away, therefore it hurts the chance of them finding a job. Elizabeth Westrope, a professor at Northwestern University, says, since 2005, approximately 700,000 persons have been released from prison annually. Approximately 1 in 3 people in the United States have some type of record. Individuals with criminal records strive to fully reintegrate into the community, but face tremendous obstacles. In addition to the economic strain that the unemployment puts on individuals with records, it also increases their chances of reoffending. Job applications require them to answer this question if they've ever had a criminal record, which actually makes it very hard for them. And if they can't find a job, they're used to selling drugs and using crime and mischief to survive in the real world. My second point, programs for inmates are not truly helping the inmates to be rehabilitated. So programs for inmates are inefficient because regardless of their outcome, they cannot use their skills to their advantage. A woman cannot be a cosmetologist, for example, because according to the law, they do not let people with criminal records get into this field. Most programs do not have follow-up with inmates, so you can't really understand what's going on after they've already been released. Another quote by Dylan Miner, a professor at Northwestern University as well, says, job applicants with a criminal record are much likely than others to receive and offer an employment. Recent audit studies suggest that lower human capital does not fully explain the difference and that employers apply a hiring penalty to job applicants with a criminal background. My third point, isolated inmates do not know how to interact with others, therefore making them very unstable. They lack the communication and social skills needed in society. Isolated inmates do not know how to interact with each other, and according to Adam Benfordo, an associate professor at the law of Drexel University, he says, for example, in Norway, held in prison, inmates, including rapists and murderers, are locked in their cells only in the evening and spend their days working, studying, exercising, and trying to rehabilitate themselves with music, for example. Rather than being denied positive human contact as punishment, they are encouraged to maintain their family connections. And the staff members at Howden act as mentors rather than enforcers, helping prisoners to overcome their problems and prepare to reintegrate back into society. The logic is simple, people. Place people in monstrous conditions and you'll create monsters. There is persistent racism in this country, although there may be no magic solution to this problem as a whole. The criminal justice system itself aggravates racial segregation today. So long as it remains unchanged, civil unrest is likely to reoccur. They do not have the communication skills needed to interact in society. Mr. Laverne Williamson says, our inability to prevent crime is partly due to our problems not understanding criminals and their behavior. Most people who are released from prison end up going back within the next 5 years anyway. So in conclusion, what do we do now? We need to add more funds to rehabilitation programs. We need to further understand what goes on through these minds and psychology, and we need to revisit inmates and add more laws against the prohibition of criminals getting jobs, such as the cosmetology example. Thank you.
All right, Arturo, the proposition's clearly identified. You have a good preview that's easy to follow. There's plenty of controversy on this. I like the opening quote, and I like the statistics that you present that suggest that there is largely a failure of either inmates or the system to be rehabilitated or to stop committing crimes. You, of course, are making a cause-effect argument saying that it's the criminal justice system that is causing this problem, even though it's not just stated directly that way. That's the inference that's being drawn there. And you point to the lack of economic assistance, the lack of programs, and to isolation within the system. The economic issue, I think, is probably a good one, although you don't have any data on what the unemployment rate is among ex-convicts, and there's not much about the difficulty of getting jobs other than that they're required to reveal that they were in fact convicts, and that some employers do put up barriers in regard to that. But without any other information, it feels a little bit thin on that point. On the issue about lacking programs to help, well, you do mention that some states might prohibit somebody from being a cosmetologist, or, and I'm sure there are other ones, for example, pedophiles are prohibited from driving school buses and that sort of thing. I'm not exactly sure that that's really where the bulk of the problem is. You need to explain, how widespread those kinds of laws are and how many people it might affect. It's very generic here. It's a good example to start with, but I'm not sure that it's enough to make a generalization from. And then the issue about isolating the inmates, you do a comparison to other parts of the world. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by isolating the inmates in the prison system. It makes it sound like we keep the prisoners locked up 24 hours a day. I don't know that that's the case. There is some isolation that occurs, but for reasons that are not discussed in your argument, except in a general way, because there are, like you said, you mentioned issues related to racism, and one of the places where there's a great deal of racism is in the prison system, so there can be problems there. I think that you have identified something that is relevant, but I'm not sure that you've figured out how we would address that kind of issue. I thought you had good evidence on most of your points. I think you could use some additional information in a couple of spots. It's delivered pretty well. At the end, you kind of are going in a direction making some policy arguments. Stick with the claim of fact, which simply is blaming the system for perpetuating itself. That way, I think you'll be safer. Thank you.